Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malman, Highland Park, New Jersey, Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet, and joining me, my good friend, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Congregation Anshe Chesed, New York City, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter, Day School of Long Island. It is great to see you guys. This is an amazing Parasha Vayeshev. Look, it's my bar mitzvah Parasha. I'm biased, so I do want to say it's the best Parasha, but that's not fair.
So I just want to add something here. I think you've said it. I know I've said it. Jeremy, I assume you too. We each have a kind of ownership for our bar mitzvah portion.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. It's a line I use with bar mitzvah boys and bat mitzvah girls. When you learn a parsha or you learn a piece of a parsha, it's like that becomes your hold, your foothold in the Torah. And my bar mitzvah was many decades ago, and this parsha has shaped in a way a lot of my appreciation of the Torah, certainly, and I don't know, to what extent it's influenced me. I'll tell you in one way it's influenced me. It's a great story. Okay,
It sure is. By
and
the way, this is I not only do have I said that about my own parsha, but I bet the two of you have four other parshiot that you feel that way about as well. And
absolutely,
Vayeshev is Hadassah's bat mitzvah parsha.
there you go. Okay, so when you were studying this with your daughter Hadass, uh, you must have noticed that this is one of the best told stories. That is to say, in terms of storytelling and storytelling technique, um, we would be hard pressed to find equivalent stories or equally powerfully told stories. Although I think we could come up with our top 10 list. We were, debating uh, this before. This would certainly be in my list of
So
top
to
10.
add to what you said, Elliot, this parsha also gave rise to one of the great works of world literature, Thomas Mann's Joseph in Egypt.
And one of the great plays on Broadway, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's not an accident. It's not an accident that Andrew Lloyd Webber used this as a great kind of opera because it's operatic. The themes, the telling, the storytelling, and it's not an accident. That the narrator in Joseph and the is the main character, because the narrator here, once we begin Vayeshev, is really the one who artfully tells the story and puts this. I'll give you one example of this, which is that in the way that the brothers see Joseph coming from a distance, and that in the way that they say, we will see what will happen from his dreams. And then later on, it's the Potiphar's wife looks at Joseph, or lifts her eyes. So the idea that there's so much repetition of seeing, that has a way of priming the listener or the reader to kind of imagine that this is playing out in front of you on a stage. That's why if you want to learn storytelling technique, you want to be a great storyteller, read this parsha, read the next three parshiot, memorize them, learn why they are great stories and how they are being told. So here we are. We're starting out with Joseph, and the first scene in this parsha is Joseph and his dreams. And we have two dreams. The first dream is that we are gathering wheat in the fields, and your bundles of wheat are bowing down to me. Okay, so imagine you hear this dream, right? You don't need to be Sigmund Freud to understand this dream, right? And that's exactly what they say to him. They say, "What? Hamalach timlach aleinu, imashol timshol banu. You're gonna reign over us? Is that what's going to happen?" And of course, we all know the ending. Spoiler alert. Right?
Rashi says spoiler alert. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. This is what happens. The second dream is the sun and the moon and 11 stars are bowing down to me. So I want to say the first dream is earth on this land. The second dream is heaven. Okay. The first dream is agriculture. The second dream is the beyond. The first dream is about power and the relationship of power and agriculture. I think there's another story going on there. The second dream is something in the broad sweep of history. Okay?
So, it's interesting what you say, Elliot. What we have here, the two dreams are one. Joseph might have said here, as he says in the next
Later
parsha.
on.
But there's no urgency here like there is in the next set of dreams, in Pharaoh's dreams.
Yes. So
why do you think that is?
I think because we're looking at a 17-year-old boy here, an adolescent who's precocious, who is already aware of his, as we have said before in previous years, his prodigious talent. I think that what a 17-year-old understands or has begun to understand is that, and especially Joseph, who has amazing talent, amazing knowledge, amazing insight, and he is in this preferential relationship with his father, which already differentiates him from the rest of his brothers. And because of the coat, and maybe other things that are identifiable about him in terms of his good looks, in terms of his maybe his sexuality, etc. There is something that is different about him, and they know it, and he knows it. He is not able to express it all, but he's just beginning. And the dreams and the urgency with which he says, I have a dream, I have a that is all the excitement of youth. It's going to get mollified over the next 20 years, basically. Yeah.
I like the observation about the agriculture and the heavenly blessing. Back when Abraham was making the covenants with God, there's two. There's a star blessing. Look up in the heavens and count the stars if you can count them, or your descendants will be like the dust of the earth that cannot be counted. And so, in a certain way, Joseph's two dreams echo the blessings to Abraham. Actually, they're in the realm of earth and in the realm of heaven. They're coming true. One thing I think, by the way, is different. The question of urgency. Why does it seem unurgent? Joseph's these dreams are about destiny that's going to play out over a long period. Those other dreams that he interprets that other people get, they're about what's going to happen tomorrow or in 3 days or in the next 7 years.
You're talking about the butler and the baker, which
so maybe the difference, the point of wisdom is Yaakov's reaction to the second dream, which is Yaakov Shamar et Hadavar. That Yaakov knows to be silent. It seems upsetting, that this little pisher is going to become our master, but we can't rule it out.
Yaakov,
but Joseph can't exhibit any kind of discretion, as you described him.
He holds on to things. He settles scores, Yaakov. V'yaviv shamar davar. He holds on to this because he knows that this piece of information is going to somehow be valuable later on, or this might be a premonition. But the way the story unfolds, it's a catastrophe for him. Okay, just we can't escape the conflict. The boys, the brothers, are out with their pasture, with their flocks, and Jacob says, "Go and look for them. Go and tell us Ashiveni davar." And basically spy on them, or tell me something about them, and come back to me, okay? And they see him from a distance, and they conspire. The minute they see him, impulsively, instinctively, they conspire. They hate him so much, they want to kill him. All right? Here he's coming, the dreamer. Let's kill him. And we'll throw him into a pit. We'll say a wild animal ate him. And we'll see what will be of his dreams. And then Reuben says, Reuben is like the total dolt here. No. Let's not spill blood. We will put him in a pit. Let not a hand touch him, so that we can save him, so that we can return him to his father. And then what happens? They throw him in a pit. They see him come. They strip his coat off. They throw him in the pit, and they sit down. I love this line. They sit down and they have a feast.
They have lunch.
So it's reminiscent of that great scene in Goodfellas where Billy Bats has just gotten out of prison and he ends up being bludgeoned almost to death in the bar. And Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci put him in the trunk and stop at Joe Pesci's mother's house so they could have dinner while he's kind of choking on his blood in the trunk.
And he gets away.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. We I always like to make reference to films, although I didn't remember that one for this. I'll have to use it in a future class. I have a film in mind for later on, but yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. The point is that we are oblivious to his suffering. There's human suffering going on here, and we're having lunch. Basically.
Well, actually, that emerges beautifully, later on in I don't know if it comes up in Miketz or Vayigash, but the brothers, not knowing that Joseph understands them when they speak Hebrew, they say, well, we listened to him pleading with us and we ignored it. It doesn't say it here.
Right. Later on,
retrospective, they later say, you remember when he was begging us and pleading us and we didn't pay any attention. That's that beautiful little storytelling. I mean, let's see what happens to his dreams. Oh, it's such a great line because, and once we are listening to the Torah, we know it's the Torah. So we already know the story. So anyone who is hearing the Torah read in synagogue or at any era in history already knows what happens. So when the brothers obliviously say, ha ha ha, Mr. Dreamer is gonna come, we're gonna stop this. We all know that destiny takes a hand.
But we might give the brothers a little bit of credit for not killing him then. Because
only by accident, only because the Ishmaelim come along, and I mean, there's the famous,
Midrash.
Yes, Midrash, but based on the small incoherence of the text, they're going to sell them, but do they sell to the Ishmaelim or to the Midyanim, or maybe the Ishmaelim steal them and then they sell them to the Midyanim? The obvious story is that the brothers sold him into slavery, but the way the Torah reads Pshat, it looks like somebody else pulls him out of the pit before the brothers get a chance to sell him into slavery. But that's not good. The whole story is that they sell their brother down the road into slavery.
Right. Okay.
So we were talking before we recorded about the famous rabbinic statement, that what happens to the ancestors are signs for what will happen to their children. So here it's pretty clear that the Israelites, what we would call the Jews, are responsible for the slavery of Yosef. Do we want to suggest then that when we get to Sefer Shemot that somehow the Hebrews are responsible there in some way for their slavery?
Absolutely, because we've talked about this. I've hammered this point home in various of our discussions over the years. In Lech Lecha, and this is the Ramban exactly, when Abraham and Sarah come down and he says, Leman yitavli ba'avurech v'chayatan nafshi biglalech, we're going to sell you into the harem so that they will do well with me for your sake and save me alive thanks to you. That's the exact same words that's going to happen with the girls being saved alive out of the river. Chayatan nafshi kol ben hayilod hayorot hashlichu v'kol abat tichayun. All the boy babies they threw in the Nile and all the girl babies they saved alive for harem use. The Ramban Nachmanides in the 13th century says, oh yeah, this is why slavery is decreed on the people, because Abraham gave up his wife into sexual slavery. This is Ma'aseh Avot Siman Banim. This is the punishment of Abraham's. I mean, I think it is an extraordinary. We in the 21st century, with our eyes, are accustomed to noting, oh my goodness, Abraham, he sells his wife into Pharaoh's harem, and we actually are accustomed to reading mistakenly, because the Torah says clearly that God stopped Avimelech from touching Sarah. We are to think that God stopped Pharaoh, but it doesn't say that. It actually says the opposite. So yes, our own exploitation, or Abraham's exploitation of Sarah, produces this. We like in the 21st century to say, oh, the Akedah, Abraham shouldn't have done that. Well, here's something else that he really shouldn't have done. And there is that punishment. So I do think that there is in the Torah itself, and here's another one straight out of the rabbis, but not but not so obviously in the Torah, that God says, it says that God dispatched Moses to Pharaoh and to the Israelites to rescue them from slavery. There's a rabbinic statement that says, so the first mitzvah was to the Israelites to release their own slaves. They had slaves in Egypt. There were slaves to Pharaoh, but also in a hierarchical, stratified Jewish society of rich and poor, there were Jews who had slaves. And they also were involved in the exploitation. I mean, it's an amazing rabbinic comment.
I like here one last footnote on this first story. So when Judah says, let's sell them to the Ishmaelites, v'yadenu al tivo, and our hand won't touch him, ki achinu b'sarenu, because he's our brother, our plan. So I mean, that's why I say it's this wonderful storytelling, because it's filled with these kind of irony upon irony and dramatic irony and humor and sarcasm and maybe not, and take it seriously. There's so many ways to read it. Obviously, it's like you're watching almost slapstick, but it's not. It's
a tragedy of errors.
Absolutely. Okay, so they sell him, and he goes to Potiphar's household. All right, there's this story that doesn't seem to fit here. This is Judah, the story of Judah, and his marriage to the daughter of Shua, her death, the birth to Judah of Er, Onan, and Shalem, and then the turning point here, where Judah gets a wife for his oldest son Er, and it says Vayikach Yudah, Vayikach Yudah Isha le'er bechoro ushma Tamar. He acquires a wife for his son, whose name is Tamar. Okay, but Er dies, and what has to happen after that is that Onan, the next son, according to the law of the Levirate, or the custom in place of the Levirate marriage, has to maintain the deceased brother's line. Okay. Onan understands that if he fathers a child with Tamar, it won't be his child. It will be under his brother's name. So he doesn't do that exactly. And because he doesn't do that, he is wicked in God's sight. He doesn't want to cohabit, or he cohabits with Tamar, but he doesn't fulfill the cohabitation.
Oh, come on, you can do better than that. He cohabits with her in such a way that heterosexual pregnancy is not an actual possibility.
There you go. Okay. And because of that, he has taken advantage of her, and not only that, he has not acted with kindness towards his deceased brother.
It's a double sin.
Yes.
So first of all, he does not fulfill the point of the Levirate marriage, which is to provide an heir for the dead brother. But he also, by not fathering a child in his dead brother's name, he is rejecting Tamar as a wife.
Exactly.
Because she can only become his wife after he has fathered a son for his dead brother.
Yes.
And by not doing that, he's saying that she's never going to be my wife.
Exactly. And so,
well, she never is, because he's going to die in punishment.
Well, I don't think he knew that at the moment.
That's like the dreams. That's actually like the dreams, because people do things, like we all know this in just regular life. We watch people do things that make sense to them, that we say, what were you thinking? Okay. And so the wise person, the insightful person, can see where this is going, and the dopes, kind of blunder on. I mean, it's like the Esav and the Yaakov story. Esav comes in, he's hungry. I need lunch right this minute, or I'm going to die. All right, sell the birthright. Who cares? Onan could have taken the long view and seen why this was best for everybody, and he's got a very short view, and the short view ends up corresponding to a short life.
Indeed, and I think the Torah really signals to us in the way that the Torah always signals moral flaw or moral violation. Vayera b'nei Adonai. That phrase Vayera b'nei is really a coded phrase. You see it, Abraham. It's the Torah uses the phrase when God wants to destroy Sodom. The Torah uses the phrase in other places where when God says, or when Sarah says to Abraham, kick out Hagar and Ishmael, Vayera b'nei Abraham. This is it's the
translate.
I'm sorry.
Translate.
It means that it is evil in the sight of, and that is a way of saying it's a moral offense. This is a moral offense. So what Onan does in all the layers of what he does is so morally repugnant. It doesn't withstand God's mercy, and therefore he is put to death. Vayamet gamoto. So here is the bereaved father now, Judah, bereaved of his firstborn, Er, his secondborn, Onan. He has a thirdborn, Shelah, who now, according to the Levirate system, has to marry also Tamar. And he has his own interest of preserving her because his two sons are dead. Okay, but
I think she's bad news.
She's bad news. So she's the winner in the story. I guess if you can say that there's a winner, maybe she's not. So she disguises herself as a harlot. She seduces, or Judah sleeps with her, and she becomes pregnant, seemingly quite easily. That's different from all the way that the other matriarchs in the up until now, they don't get pregnant so easily. But Tamar, no problem. And she has, and when Judah discovers that she's pregnant with twins, he says, wow, she's become a prostitute. Take her out and have her burned. But Judah has already deposited a collateral with her because he's promised her an animal for payment, and she shows up with his credit card, his ID, his
driver's license,
everything. She's got all the ID for him, and she said, and basically she says, the one who owns these things is responsible. Who owns this signet, these cords, and this staff? Vayaker Yehuda, he recognizes it. Vayomer tzedka mimenu. And you have, it's not outrighteous me. You are totally right.
So it's a curious thing here, because first, I think Yehuda blames Tamar for the death of Aaron Onan, which is why he's reluctant to marry Shelah. And then he blames Tamar for adultery, when in fact he's the one who impregnated her. And ultimately he's going to abandon her, right?
Yeah,
because he's not going to marry her.
Judah, in a sense.
Oh, well, no, wait a second. I don't think that last conclusion was right. It says he never has sex with her again. I don't think that means.
Only the Tosafists think you could live in the house with a woman and not have sex with her.
Okay, so it is fair to say. But I have just a different interpretation of that fact. One could totally say, yes, now that renders her off limits for another person, and she's a human being, so she might want to have a sexual partner. But I think that the crux of the story here is that Levirate marriage, we were talking about this before we started recording. Levirate marriage is this, in the Torah's mind, in the mind of halacha later. This is a story in Genesis, so it's before the Torah was given. There's always a little bit of gap between the early behavior and then the post behavior after the law is promulgated. But Levirate marriage is this required act. It's this mitzvah act, which is right at the border of incest. It's a transgression. You're not ordinarily a man cannot sleep with a sister-in-law, and never, but except there's this one case, the Levirate marriage, the dead childless brother. So there's this one avenue by which what is ordinarily a prevailing prohibition lapses, but there is not a basic avenue for a father-in-law, daughter-in-law, and yet that is what Yehuda has done. I think there's at least two interesting things that are going on here. One, about the part about they never had sex again, is I think that the Torah wants to say, by the way, I just want you to know, Yehuda totally understood that this was a providential act. This was not for his own, satisfying his own urges or anything like that. It never happened again. So Yehuda was pretty, he had the right values about that. But the second thing is, which is because Peretz will be the ancestor of David, will be the ancestor of the Redeemer. There's a way in which the Torah tells a story that says, by the way, we got lots of laws, we got lots and lots of laws, we got lots of norms. That's the way to live. And sometimes the most important things happen when the norms get violated. So you're not allowed to marry two sisters, except I know somebody who was married to two sisters. It was Yaakov Avinu. And you're not allowed to privilege the lower born over the actual physical firstborn, except I know somebody who did, and it was Yaakov Avinu. And you're never supposed to sleep with your daughter-in-law. But actually, the Mashiach is going to be born ultimately from the union. At that time, when Judah slept with his daughter-in-law, it's like an edge. The Torah is a very normative universe, and there are some really important moments that violate the norms. It's like the edge of the normative universe.
Wow. Okay. So, what's the story doing here anyway? I mean, other than that beautiful kind of homiletic, which is, it breaks the norm, but it also establishes Judah in somewhat differentiated from the rest of the brothers, which is what happens later on in history. Judah usurps Reuben as the clan leader. When they're down in Egypt, of course, next week, Judah will be the one that is the spokesman for the family. And it really takes this moment of humbling. He is humbled by this experience. It's part of the character development of Judah to establish him as someone who will have experienced this setback and been able to overcome.
So it also, I think, in a certain way, it establishes the purity of the Davidic line, which Ruth, in its own way, undermines. Ruth is a Moabite woman, which is forbidden by Torah law. But Tamar is not apparently one of the seven. Doesn't belong to the 7 nations. She's not a local that the Torah is either going to call for their utter destruction or for not having anything to do with while the Israelites are in the land. And so it provides a veneer, I think, of purity for David.
Fascinating. Okay, so now we're back in Egypt. We're in Egypt with Joseph, and Joseph is at the home of Potiphar, and she likes
Mrs. Potiphar.
Mrs. Potiphar. I think he likes him too. But anyway, so she really likes him a lot. I can't take her eyes off of him. And she wants to sleep with him, and things unfold, so to speak. And he's standing.
Well, it didn't quite unfold. She was left with his garment in her hand.
Right. So he's outside naked, and then she frames him. And we have to examine how Mr. Potiphar behaves here in some ways. You want to offer it?
Well, you had a good theory before.
The good theory is that he knows that his wife is a crackpot, and he knows that Joseph is prodigiously talented. So he's got to punish Joseph, but not executing him.
When you say crackpot, is Mrs. Potiphar like erratic or erotic? Like is she?
Well, so the way you said crackpot, I immediately thought of John and Martha Mitchell from Watergate fame. She was something of a crackpot, Mrs. Mitchell, but John never divorced her. And she said some outrageous things about the Nixon presidency while it was coming apart in the early 70s. But I think here with Mrs. Potiphar is that Potiphar knows who she is, and she is attracted to immoral behavior, unless what occurred to me while you were talking, Elliot, is that maybe her designs on Joseph were not about Joseph, but it's a way of asserting herself over her husband.
Absolutely.
And Potiphar is left in this difficult situation where he doesn't want Joseph to be put to death because he knows that he's probably innocent. On the other hand, he cannot not accept the tale that his wife tells because she's his wife, and therefore he goes to prison.
Right. And in prison, Joseph becomes like the chief prisoner. And if we read carefully, and I'm here this interpretation that Potiphar is Sarat Abachim, is also in charge of the prison. So in some way that Joseph has a functional role to Potiphar, which Potiphar feels is indispensable. So Potiphar needs him to function as the chief prisoner, which is an archetype in another movie, Shawshank Redemption, right? Dufresne. It's a remarkable movie in which the character Dufresne is the accountant to the warden, and
also framed,
and is also framed. And it's, I mean, Stephen King, who wrote the short story, he must have been playing with the Joseph theme on this, okay? And so here in the movie, the prisoner is in prison because he's framed. The prisoner fulfills the accounting needs of laundering money for the warden, and in the end, spoiler. But anyway, the point is that by having that role, it's very, very complicated for the prisoner, and only until it's broken at the end does it get resolved. In prison, though, we have to finish with the two dreams. So he meets up with Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker, who are both in prison. We don't know why they're in prison, but they're in prison, and they have a dream. Each one has a dream, and Joseph interprets their dream. The cupbearer's dream is the cupbearer says, I'm squeezing the grapes. There are 3 branches of grapes on the vine, and they flowered and produced fruit immediately, and I took the fruit and I made the wine for Pharaoh. And so Joseph says, in 3 days, you're going back to your post. The baker dreams and says, I had a dream also. I had 3 baskets of bread on my head, and a bird was eating the bread from the top basket. And Joseph says, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to take off your head. And so we said, it's interesting that Joseph, makes a deal with, or he asks the chief cupbearer, remember me to Pharaoh. But when Joseph interprets the baker's dream, he really doesn't say anything. It says, the text is beautiful. It says, B'od shloshet yamim, in 3 days, Yisa Paro et roshcha me'alecha, Pharaoh's going to take your head off, v'tala otcha aletz, and going to impale you on a tree.
Well, what does Joseph actually mean when he says, remember me to Pharaoh? What is the
he wants to get out of jail. What does he
I
want?
understand that, but what is the message the butler is supposed to give Pharaoh that would induce Pharaoh to say, you served long enough?
What the message to Pharaoh is, you have someone wrongfully accused.
But how does his interpretation of the dream show that?
The interpretation of the dream is just instrumental. The interpretation is, you're getting out of jail. The dream is an omen to you that you're going to be free. And now that you're going to be free, do me a favor. Remember me. Get me out of here. I've been imprisoned, bro. I've been kidnapped and stolen and sent down here against my will. And here I've been framed.
Well, why isn't it all that is correct, but the last part might not even be necessary. You might be able to say, I mean, it's the great line of Gunov Gunavti me eretz ha'ivrim. I've been kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, very resonant line, but he doesn't even have to be wrongfully imprisoned, because you might say, remember me to Pharaoh and tell him that there is a guy down here who can do something that no one else can do. This guy is, all the talents that we've spoken about, the charismatic gifts. This guy's charism is he knows dreams. Useful guy. So why doesn't it just mean when you get out of here and you're restored to your place, you remind the powerful people that I'm special and I might be useful to them?
I don't think that's what he's saying. Wait, let me say. He's saying, Asita na'ima dichadizkartani aparavotzitani mina bayit hazeh. Take me out of this place. I've been stolen from the land of Hebrews. So he doesn't say, send me back home, right?
This is the part that you're right. They put me here and I am wrongfully imprisoned. I haven't done a damn thing. And they put me in the dungeon.
But he's not asking for an exit visa. He's just asking for get out of jail, free card, basically.
So it's interesting, though, because we have the word vahotzeti, which, of course, resonates with the Exodus story.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
And the idea here seems to be that Joseph thinks that Pharaoh is going to take him out of slavery. And what's going to happen, of course, in Shemot is we all are going to learn that only God can. But in the very beginning of the bargaining between Moshe and Pharaoh, we're led to believe that Pharaoh is going to be the one to let the people out of Egypt.
Okay, so
but I don't want to leave without saying the humor, the tremendous humor. Like we talked about, Elliot, you were saying about how this is just the most masterfully well told story in the Torah, and I concur. It's just really on a literary level so nice. But this terrific slapstick humor in this. The butler is given his dream, and Joseph interprets it. Zeh Pitrono, this is the thing. Shloshet Hasrayim, Shloshet Yamim, so the three clusters of the grapes for 3 days, and 3 more days. Be'od Shloshet Yamim, Yisa Paro et Roshecha. In 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head, Veheshivacha al kanecha, and return you to your job. And then the baker's real happy because then he also has a dream of 3. And then Joseph responds to him and says, Zeh Pitrono, Shlosh Nasalim Shloshet Yamim, him, the 3 baskets are 3 days. Be'od Shloshet Yamim, Yisa Paro et Roshcha me'alecha. In 3 days, Pharaoh will pick up your head and remove it from your body. So you've got the exact same words, and it's telling the story. This is just a punchline. This is the Borscht Belt. This is the Borscht Belt line.
Okay, so the Parsha ends with Pharaoh's birthday. They haul him out of jail, both the wine cupbearer and the baker, and the wine cupbearer goes back to his post. And that in that moment, I the way I would direct that scene is, everybody's kind of rooting, yeah, way to go, wine guy, right? And then the baker comes out, and they're all kind of like, what's going to happen now? And then Pharaoh says, basically, hang the guy. And everybody at the birthday party goes, yeah, well done, Pharaoh. So the politics of it I think are clear, meaning that Pharaoh has benevolence, but Pharaoh's ruthless. And the purpose of the story, at least one message of the story is, of course, we're setting this up for next week's telling. This Pharaoh you have to honor in some ways for his benevolence, because he's benevolent to Joseph in the end, but he's quite ruthless. And Joseph will become his subject, who is at every whim of Pharaoh. He needs Pharaoh's beneficence, because Pharaoh could be ruthless to him as well. And I think that's the dangerous tightrope that Joseph is walking on, and that's where the Parsha leads us.
This is I can't do something as nice as Goodfellas, but there's a lot of Game of Thrones here. Benevolent dictators are benevolent, but they're dictators. And Pharaoh is that.
Yeah, this is about power and politics and lots and lots of things, which is why on so many levels this is such a rich and beautiful story. It's we have this question: what makes the Torah great? This is what makes the Torah great, and what makes it even greater. Go ahead.
There's this allure of the court, though, because the very last line of the Parsha is one of the great lines in the Torah.
Yeah.
Tzar ha'ofim tala kasher patar lahem Yosef v'lo zachar sar mashkim et Yosef vayishkachehu. And the butler did not remember Joseph. He forgot all about him. Yeah. Because once the butler is back in the court, he's in the world of Pharaoh. Yeah. And no longer cares about Yosef.
Exactly.
Egyptian guys tend to forget Joseph.
What?
Egyptian guys tend to forget Joseph. This guy forgot him.
Looking forward, though, we're left with something that's bothered me for a long time, is who forgets the Israelites when they were slaves in Egypt? That could only be the other Pharaoh-like figure, and that's God.
God does remember them.
Well, he can only remember them after he's forgotten them, I would think.
But let's not trash. Let's not flag God.
Not trashing. Just
God has. It's not that it's remembering. It's not first in his mind.
I think we can save God, but we don't have to. God's a big guy.
We don't have to worry about God. God can fend for himself. At any rate, I was going to say what makes the Torah great is this beautiful story, and it's told in such a way. And what makes the study of Torah great is that each of us has so much to offer to each other and learn. We all learn from each other in this, and we hope that the people watching and listening to us have learned from us, at least enjoyed the humor, the pathos, the sadness, the tragedy, the everything that's in this story.
I laughed. I cried. It was much better than Cats. Much better than Cats.
We can't wait to see you next week on the next edition of Parasha Talk. Thank you so much for watching. Send us your comments, and we'll see you again. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.